Hello, and hello, squirrel. Early morning, squirrel. Okay, well, here we are, Christmas week. So, Monday. Now, my objective this week, if I can do get the time to do it, which I should be able to, is do 3 walkie talkies this week. Today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. I'll take us up to Christmas Eve, and then a break for the Christmas period, and then sort of crack on. Maybe do a couple between Christmas and New Year, and then start again after New Year's Day. We'll see how it all pans out again. We're very much at the mercy of the weather gods. And it's pretty good at the moment, but that can change. So what I want to talk about in these 3 days leading up to Christmas is stuff that I got at Christmas, be it games consoles or computers. And the feelings really of getting them things as somebody who was into computers and computer games, and by extension console games, because I've touched on these things while I've been doing these walks in general, but I thought I'd focus on the sort of specific computers and consoles. I thought I'd do a couple in each video, starting back with my first computer. Now, this isn't my first console or computer. That was the Radifin TV Games 5, I think. But the reason I want to start with the computers that I'm going to start with is because the ones I actually have some memory of getting and what it felt like to get them. I don't really have much memory of the Radifin TV games. It was kind of bought as a sort of curiosity, a family electronics device. It was more bought for that purpose than actually being something very specific to me, although I did end up inheriting it, as everybody else sort of palmed it off. I ended up with it, although I didn't really play on it too much because it was really built around multiplayer, and it was not very much fun to play it by yourself. So, I'm going to kick off today with the Commodore VIC20 and the Commodore 64. And as usual, we'll get into details when we get down the pigeon there. Well, yeah, when we get round to the park, we'll get into some details with it. But until such time, We'll just finish up walking down this little lane. Now, as I say, I know I've covered these before, but they've been kind of general. So I'm just going to break these into these days. I'm going to cover some others as well that I got in and around Christmas. I'll cover them as well. That my missus got me. We'll talk about them because they were very awesome and been very impactful as well. So we'll call it there and see you in the park. Right, so let's kick off. Let's not mess about. I haven't got time to today. 1982. Oh, was it the Christmas of 81 or was it the Christmas of 82? That's a good question. Anyhow, that's when I got the Commodore VIC20 and my mum and dad bought me for Christmas. I've already told the story of how that came into being. So my mum and dad wanted to get me a computer, and they had a choice between that. Oh, actually, was it 83? Was it 83? When did the 48K Spectrum come out? You know what? We need to fact check here. I'm sure I had the VIC20 a couple of years before the C64 at the very least. So that might have been, let's have a look. That might have been 83. Oh my God, the 48K Spectrum, 1982. Yeah, so it would have been the Christmas of 82. Wow, that was out for a while. Christmas of 82 it would have been. That's not when it come out. It come out in April 82 according to internet. So yeah, it was the Christmas of 82. And my mum and dad had the choice well, they wanted to get me a computer. And I've told the story, but we'll go over it again. Because as Stan Lee once wisely said, every comic is somebody's first issue. Every video might be somebody's first watch. So you've always got to make sure that people know the background, so they've got context. Which is wise words. That's why Stan Lee was a great storyteller. And why you could pick up Marvel comics back then, having missed certain issues and still know what the hell was going on. Anyway, of course, he had helpers, like Steve Ditko and what have you. But I'm not a comic book nerd, so I'll leave my knowledge right there before I end up screwing that up. Anyway, oh God, it's cold. I'm sniffly, sorry. Back to the VIC20, having done our little fact check. So, my mum and dad got me the VIC20. Now, they had plans to get me the Spectrum 48K. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't even mention getting a computer at this point. as I've already mentioned, I just like playing games, and I had my little Radafin TV games too. I didn't really bother with that much, but I had the little handheld and the little tabletop games. The Grandstand one, I had a Galaxy Invaders one. Things like that. Things you probably these days would be classified as being something of a curiosity rather than anything else. A little distractions. But I had these and I played on them and I loved them. I've already said I played them to death. Although, to answer the question, there wouldn't have been any world record broken finishing them games. Everyone could have finished them games, to be honest with you. They weren't in the same class as arcade machines or anything like that. So to answer to address that point, no, they weren't world records whatsoever. I just got good enough to play through to the end of them because I played them loads, but they weren't in the same class of difficulty as arcade machines. In fact, I think there was 2 or 3 difficulty settings, I think, that just changed the speed. So, I mean, I just had a couple of them things for for a while, for ages, and played on them all the time, and you just going to get better. Practice makes perfect. And I had, kid reflexes, like the bloody Neo out of the Matrix, that kids have reflexes like that. I certainly don't have them now. I probably wouldn't even get off the first bloody screen now. But anyway, so I had absolutely no idea I was getting a computer. I hadn't asked for one. And I know, so I come down on Christmas Day morning. It's just like, there is a long rectangular box, which is quite heavy. And what is this? Now, my natural thought was, at that time, oh, what Star Wars toy is this? Because I did get Star Wars stuff. One Christmas I got the Millennium Falcon and an X-Wing. One Christmas I got an AT-AT and an AT-ST, an AT-AT, as we called them, because all my mates used to call them that. So, one Christmas, in and around that period of time, I got a BMX bike, which was an ultra burner, and to this day still remains my favourite bike I've ever had. The bike was black and gold, and had black mag wheels. I didn't want the sort of gold spoked wheels that came with it. You could buy these lightweight black mag wheels, and I got them, and it was great. That bike was my favourite ever bike, still to this day. Nothing has ever come close to replacing that as my favourite bike. It looked amazing. Anyway, back to the VIC20, getting all misty-eyed over my BMX bike from the 80s, which is also the bike responsible for why I've got a messed up right knee. That's a story for another day. But yeah, the VIC20. So I unbox this and it's like, VIC20 home computer. I'm like, what the hell's a VIC20? So I'm like, oh, cool. It's a computer, knowing that I like gadgety stuff. And of course, that's when my mum, or was it my mum or my dad? I think it was my mum said, well, we were going to get you the Spectrum, but that's the story then. The place where we got this from advised against it because of the rubber keys. And that, you know, they sort of sit on this sort of rubber, I don't know what the hell they call it. But anyway, they were told by the people that were selling the computers that the rubber keys would wear out, and the VIC20 keyboard was a proper keyboard. As I've said, I had friends that had the VIC20, the Spectrum 48K. I never knew any of them that had the keyboard issues. There may have been. As I've said before, I know about the joystick interface cartridge issues where if you moved it slightly, the computer would reset. But that was fixed by putting a bit of blue tack there. But anyway, so I get this, and you know, it's funny, even back then I was kind of obsessed with the instruction manuals. Anyway, I watched my dad set it up. I was reading the instructions. And watched my dad set it up and plug it into the TV downstairs, the big TV. I wasn't really allowed that. Downstairs, I wasn't allowed it. I allowed to touch behind that TV. I had my own little portable TV at the time, which was an amazing black and white one that was a hand-me-down from my sister. That she had that. She had that TV. She bought from Boots. She worked there, and so I think I got this hand-me-down black and white, like 14-inch portable telly. That was mine. With a big colour TV downstairs, I wasn't allowed to mess around with that. You know, as like an 8-year-old, Dad's like, don't even look at that TV. Anyway, he hooked it up, and I got going, playing games. Now, I think it came with a game pack. The only game I remember in this game pack was a game called Blitz. And in that game, you control this little biplane that's descending. It's running out of fuel. And it's the aircraft goes from the left of the screen to the right, and underneath it is a city with all these skyscrapers. And because your aircraft's running out of fuel, you are descending the screen. Every time you get to the end of the screen, it drops one character line. And you hit the space bar, and it would drop bombs. And you had to clear all of the bombs. All of the buildings by dropping bombs on them. And yeah, you completed the level if you managed to clear all of the buildings. And it was great, except the fact that when my sister and her then partner come round, I couldn't get near this damn computer. I couldn't get near this VIC20. They were on it. And I do remember having something of a conniption about it. I do remember getting quite irate. And, like, my computer and I can't get near it. And I always remember coming out of with this quip, it's supposed to be Christmas, peace and goodwill to all men. And I think it was my sister. She sort of retorted, yeah, but except for you. And yeah, I wasn't best impressed that day, Christmas Day. But yeah, eventually I did get to go on it. But yeah, they sort of hogged it for a lot of that day. And I've always often wondered if that's why my sister ended up getting a Commodore 64, because the Blitz game did come out on that. Anyhow, yeah, she was pretty addicted to this, it's fair to say. And anyway, I did eventually get to play it. And again, it was one of them. I didn't really have loads of games for it. At that time, most of my games actually came for birthdays and Christmas, because, 8, 9 years of age, I couldn't do any work, couldn't do part-time work, just too young, even back in the 80s. So I didn't really have many games for it. I remember, like, my following birthday, my sister actually getting Jeff Minter's Matrix, which was the sequel to Grid Runner, here in the UK. I think, was it that, or was it Grid Runner that was called Attack of the Mutant Camels in the US, which was an entirely different game in the UK and Europe. That was the Empire Strikes Back clone. Grid Runner was more of a sort of, a bit like a Centipede type game, with the bad guys coming down from the top of the screen and you having to kill them all, although it was a lot more difficult and more advanced, because you had these two lasers that would patrol down the left-hand side of the screen and along the bottom of the screen, that would randomly fire a really fast zap. So you had to be mindful of them, as well as shooting the stuff. It got quite hectic. It was a tough game. You can actually get these on the Jeff Minter collection. It's available on current consoles, and I think it's on PC as well. And there's actually a version of Blitz on there. It's called City Bomb, or City Bomber, which is a version of that that came out on the Spectrum. So if you ever want to check out some really old nostalgia on a modern system, get that, it's well worth it. But it has different versions of the games as well. Anyway, I had that. Had a game called Arcadia, which was some Imagine software. That was like a top-down shooter. That was difficult. I'm trying to think what other games I had. Oh, 3D Emmet Attack. My sister got me that. And then there was it Cosmic Muncher or something? I'm trying to remember the name of this game. But that was basically a Pac-Man clone. But instead of Pac-Man, it was the Commodore logo, which is often referred to as the chicken head or chicken lips logo. Yeah, there was that. That was on cartridge. Now, when she got me Matrix, she also got me a 16K RAM pack cartridge, because you needed that to run the game. That expanded the RAM inside the VIC20 to a whacking great big 16K of RAM. I know, right? Check that out. And she also got me a joystick, the Commodore joystick, which was The joystick part was very similar to the Atari one, the classic Atari joystick, although the base was a bit smaller, and the fire button was located centrally. And instead of just being a little round red button, it was like a red-orange oval button, and the base was white, and the joystick part itself was black. But it had that sort of very stiff, similar feel to it. Didn't have a very long travel distance, but it was actually a pretty good joystick for playing games where you needed quick reactions. It was very robust as well. That was the only joystick I ever had for the VIC20. But yeah, so I didn't have a massive amount of games for it. I had some others as well. Wacky Waiters, that sticks in my mind. Catcher Snatcher, that sticks in my mind. I think those two were Imagine games. But yeah, I didn't have a huge amount of games because, of course, the following year, the Commodore 64 sort of came out in force, and that sort of supplanted the VIC20. And say that was when my sister got a C64, and then I was really wanting one of them at that point, really wanting one. And yeah, they got that. Played on it quite a bit, but it was actually on that I started to play, not play, that's the wrong phrase, started to learn typing on it, how to type on a keyboard. We had a project at school, at primary school, with like a computer project. And because I had a home computer, not everybody did, there was a handful of us that got to join this computer club. It was to do some projects on the BBC Micro that the school had. And the one I was telling you, you got like a few minutes on once a month if you were lucky. And I remember practicing sort of programming and typing on the VIC20. Now, obviously, the programming stuff on the VIC20 was different to the BBC Micro, but it was good practice. That was sort of my first steps into the realms of programming in BASIC. But, like most kids, not all, but most, it was about the games. And I enjoyed my VIC20, but because, like I say, shortly thereafter games did start to become quite difficult to find for it. I remember just being frustrated every time we went out to places like, some of these shops are gone now, but like John Menzies, which was like a news agency type place, a bit like WH Smith, which again was another news agency type place. But these places sold games. Even Boots, like I've said before, which was strictly speaking a chemist, sold games. And it was just only they only ever seemed to be 3 or 4 Commodore 64 Commodore VIC20 games in there, and I had them. Or they were games I just wasn't interested in. I didn't want to play. And when Ghostbusters come out on the Commodore 64, my sister got the game. And when I used to be around at her house, I'd be playing it. And I loved that game. Absolutely loved that game. Wanted to play it all the time. and was hoping it would come out on the VIC20. I mean, look, this thing literally came out on everything back then, everything. Like, I think it even came out on the VCS20 600. The Atari VCS20 600, I'm damn sure there's a version of it on that. And it didn't come out on the, well, if it did come out on the VIC20, no store I ever went in ever held a copy of that game. So if it ever did come out on the VIC20, I never saw it. I remember my dad would always ask when he went out to the shops, he'd always pop in and say, is it coming out? And he was always like, oh yeah, it'll come out. And he never did, or they never got it. So I never got to play it. Because, you know, I only had a small collection of games. And it was pretty limiting. You know, as a kid, you don't want to sit there and be programming all the time. And that's all I could really do. I'd gotten bored of the games and I just stopped using it. And so, you know, I had always wanted a Commodore 64 at this point. I mean, that was still the new kid on the block. It was still the thing. But I was just starting to lose interest in computers. I think my mum and dad saw this. You know, after I got the VIC20, I'd got a BMX and I was just out on my bike all the time. The VIC20 was just stuck in my bedroom, on a desk in my bedroom, and it connected to, well, what was, you know, still the black and white TV. I mean, that was the other thing as well. I mean, it wasn't exactly the greatest setup to enjoy what I had. And even though I was allowed to take it downstairs when my mum and dad weren't watching TV and put it on the TV downstairs, like, I think my dad had sort of seen that I knew what I was doing in plugging the RF cable into the back of the TV. Yeah, they obviously noted I wasn't really doing that anymore. And I think the you know, because I just wasn't. I liked it. I have very fond memories of it, like I've said. But there just wasn't enough stuff out for it. There wasn't enough games that shops were selling. There's probably a significant number of games released. But shops weren't carrying them. And that was, you know, around where I lived, and what else can you do? There's no internet to buy them on then. So if your high street didn't have them, that was it. So I sort of drifted away from it, from using it. I was just out all the time on my BMX. Injuring myself, knackering my knee in. So, but when I would go around to my sister's, I'd always be mithering to go on the Commodore 64. It wasn't, at that point as well, it wasn't just Ghostbusters. It was games like Raid Over Moscow, Beachhead, a whole load. And it was just, my sister had more games for that C64 than I had for my VIC20 at that point. And so it was like, every time I was around, it must have been driving her mad. You know, flying visit round at house, going to play on your Commodore? No, it's in its box. Oh. So later, about, when would it have been? It would have been the Christmas of 85. It wasn't 84, it was 85, I think, I'm sure. I'd started grammar school, secondary school, as an 11-year-old. That Christmas, I got a Commodore 64. Now, I had a suspicion that I was getting it, and the reason being, my uncle was very much into computers, and I'd gone round to his house, with my mum and dad had gone round to his house, and he had a Commodore 64, and he had an absolute stack load of games, and he even had the monitor for it as well. And you know, my mum and dad were sort of in conversation. How much was it? Where did he get it from? You know, are there plenty of games for it? All of that. And yeah, you know, a kid of that age is easily starting to piece together, not very subtly. And my uncle was like, well, I've got all these games that I don't play anymore. He can have them. You know, and you're overhearing this. It's like, I might be in another room, but I can still hear you. So obviously, like, I start getting excited. Because this would have been around, it was a couple of months before Christmas. And so, yeah, I sort of got wind of it. So I kept like saying, am I getting a Commodore 64 for Christmas? And parents doing that annoying, no. No, we were just curious. We were just, you know, finding out. It's like, right, okay. And of course, comes Christmas, I see, another large rectangular box, not too dissimilar to the box for the VIC20. And there it was, my C64, which worked for a day. And then it had this weird error. Because back then, to change games on a computer, you didn't, to change over the games, you had to turn the computer off, the C64 off, and then back on again. There wasn't really much in the way of a reset button. So I remember I'd been playing Way of the Exploding Fist, which was one of the games that my uncle had given me, ones that he'd finished with. I'd played a bit of Ghostbusters and I was just trying out these other games, see what they were like. And Way of the Exploding Fist was one of them. And so put that on. And then when I turned the computer off and back on again, the screen wouldn't come on. So I was like, oh, that's strange. Now, the really weird thing was when I pressed play on the cassette deck, the screen would come on. That was weird. The minute I stopped the cassette from running, the screen would go off. And this was on, it was later on Christmas Day. Now, obviously the shops were shut on Christmas Day, and back then in the UK on Boxing Day, they were shut as well. So I'm like, oh, wonderful. So yeah, it was broke. I was gutted, absolutely gutted. So anyway, I got the computer swapped out. It was I had to wait until the day after Boxing Day. So they took it to the computer store where they got it from. and they swapped it with a new one, which worked fine. And the rest was history, as they say. I remember just playing games to death on that, absolutely loved it. And of course, there was no scarcity in finding games for the Commodore 64, none whatsoever. The games were, you could buy them, there was loads of games everywhere. The places I mentioned before, they didn't really sell that many VIC20 games, if any. You know, their shelf space was sort of almost evenly, certainly divided between the C64 and the Spectrum, quite an even distribution between those two. And then a little bit smaller, but there was still plenty of them, was the Amstrad CPC 464. And then you get the smaller ones like the Dragon 32, Acorn Electron, BBC Micro. They'd have them games, but it was certainly dominated by what we would call the big three back then. And that became my computer throughout the rest of the 80s and even into the early 90s. I didn't get an Amiga until 1992, which was the Amiga 600. So in terms of computers, I had the C64 as my main computer, and by extension my main games machine for 7 years. I mean, even when I got the Sega Master System in and around 1989, I still played more on my C64. I mean, chiefly the C64 sound was vastly superior to the Master System. The Master System had better graphics, C64 had better sound. And, you know, it just had far more games that I could afford. The Master System games coming on cartridge were about £25–30. The C64 games were £10 on cassette or £14 on floppy disk. I did get a floppy disk drive one Christmas for my C64 as well. Now, it wasn't the 1541, it was an Evesham Micros. It was a clone of it, but it was actually, I believe, better than the 1541. It certainly wasn't as bulky, it was slimline, but I believe it was more reliable. I don't know. That's what I believe. I was told. But it was very good. So, you know, I had a box of games. It was an old, by the I should point out at this time, my parents had the house extended and had bought, we used to have like this 18-inch Hitachi TV, and they had the house extended, and then they went and bought this 28-inch Hitachi TV. So I inherited that TV from downstairs in around 85. So yeah, in around 85 I inherited that TV, and that TV was outstanding. I actually had that TV going into the PlayStation era. When I got my PlayStation, still had it, and it was still going strong in the spare room. eventually, to get rid of it, it was just that old. It started to have issues, and I think it was a bit of a fire hazard. But that TV was amazing. Bulletproof. That people had broke into the house and they'd stolen that TV, and a neighbour had actually stopped them, and they dropped it. That Hitachi TV got dropped, and it still worked flawlessly. That wouldn't happen today with your LED or OLED panels. If you look at them things, funny, they stop working. But that TV was the most robust, top quality TV, 18-inch TV of it I ever had. And well, you know, I say, it stayed with me for a number of years. It was a sad day when I had to let that go. But it was great. So, you know, I was there playing C64 games on it. They looked great. They sounded great. I only had a mono speaker, but that didn't matter. It was a decent speaker on it. So yeah, that was it. I remember we'd go around to my sister's on Boxing Day. She'd do us like a dinner. Everyone would come to our house on Christmas Day, and we'd go around to hers on Boxing Day. And I remember that year I was just like, what we'd do is, because she just lived round the corner, one of us would go back round to our house and like shut the curtains and turn the lights on. And I volunteered to do it one year. And my C64 was still up, actually on the big TV downstairs where I'd been playing it. And I thought, oh, while I'm here, I'll just have a quick go on it. Well, I must have lost track of time because my dad turned up, and he was none too happy, it has to be said. He was none too happy that I'd vanished. Let's just go over here. People coming the other way. I'm going to wrap this up in a minute anyway. What time are we at? Oh yeah, we're wrapping it up in a minute. Yeah, I'd lost track of time, and he turned up obviously concerned as to where I was. You know, they were probably worried sick that I was all right. And yeah, he was not a happy camper. But yeah, I've told the story as well, like, I got that Christmas, and in the following year, we had at school, I had a French teacher. I hated French, hated studying it, couldn't get to grips with it at all, didn't like it. I didn't like learning French. I wasn't very good at it. So I was struggling in a class, and I don't know why my mum brought up the fact that I had a computer and spent time on it, because I wasn't great, but I was doing all right in other stuff. And this bloody French teacher said to me, Mum, I need to spend less time on a computer, more time studying. I was like, so my mum took my computer off me. Said, you can have it back in the summer. All because of this bastard French teacher. He's like, no, I just don't like French. Don't like studying it. Nothing against the place. Nothing against the language. I just wasn't any good at it. Learning languages was not my thing. So, you know, it had absolutely zero to do with the time on my C64. I was doing all right, English, history, geography, you know. I wasn't even too terrible at maths, that came later. But I'm one of them people, if I'm not interested in something, I'm not going to bother with it. And that has always been me. Like, I have to be interested. If I'm not interested, I don't care. Like, I shut down completely to it. It just becomes like, you know, blah, 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 whatever. And that was the case. And funnily enough, I probably learned more French outside of school than I did in it. But it was compulsory for the first 2 years. And I just was useless at it. I did try, but I couldn't get it, so I wasn't interested. And yeah, after 2 years at school, we got the ability to drop it and take up classical studies, which was like ancient Rome and ancient Greece, and I took that instead. I actually learnt more Latin than I did French, because that was like part of the thing with studying ancient Rome, obviously. So, although I've forgotten all of it now. But anyway, like I say, absolutely zero issue with the French language. I was just rubbish at it, and so consequently, I wasn't that interested in it. So fast forward to the end of that period of time, the end of the period of time when it was banned. One thing that C64 come with was this like a piano keyboard overlay for the keyboard, and it was a piece of software. I've mentioned this before. I think it was SFX or something like that. I don't think it was SX64, because I think, as I've said before, that was the portable Commodore 64 or portable computer. I think it was that. So I'm not sure. It might have been SFX64. Anyway, it was a keyboard. It's a plastic keyboard that sat on top of the C64 keyboard. And because I was doing music at school, I used that as a way of getting my C64 out of quarantine. I was like, listen, I'm doing music. I mean, it's true, actually. I was doing music, and we were learning to read and write music, and we were learning notes. And this thing had little stickers on the keyboard that told you what the notes were. So I was able to get my C64 out of quarantine. Now, what I used to do was, like, every other day I would play on it for a bit. So, like, if my mum was going past, she could hear, well, yeah, he is using it. But the rest of the time I used to put games in. I was playing games. And I think, they say it was only like a month or so I was without it. But my grades in that time didn't improve in French. And they were the same as they were with everything else. So it sort of was self-evident as well that it made no difference. So yeah, I got that back. And then later on, I got the C64 C. I think that was around 1988. And that was the Hollywood. They did a Hollywood bundle. And that came with Rambo, which I already had. That was one of the first games I got. Rambo, Platoon, The Great Escape, Miami Vice. I think there might have been another one, I'm not sure. Trying to think now. Trying to think what the other one was. It might have, it was Great, yeah, whatever. Anyway, I got that, and that was the one that had the weird issue with the sound chip, with the SID chip. In that, I don't know if it was that batch or that model. It wasn't great with the digitized sound. It was fine with everything else, but the digitized sound wasn't great. And that was the one that I had right to the end. And my sister had gotten rid of her Commodore 64 in that time period, so I actually gave her the one that I had, because she had kids and they like to play around on computers at that point, so it was a pretty good starting point for them. So yeah, and that, I got that for Christmas as well, the C64C, and that one had an issue. I had to take it to the computer shop because the tuner on it needed adjusting so it would work with the TV that I had, with the Hitachi TV. It wouldn't tune in. But there was a little tiny screw on the back, on the tuner, so we were able to do that. So yeah. So yeah, anyway, that's pretty much that. I'm going to call it there because this place is turning into a zoo. And I'll see you with the next one. So I'll catch you later.